Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Just a warning, this post is going to be about how I personally responded to this week in politics. It's very much not a screed about my political views. So if you were here for great political debate, this is not the place. And if you're just here for the books, this is also probably a video to skip, although I do talk a little bit about literature. In my last post, I mentioned that I was holding my breath, as I know many of you were, as we waited to see what happened with the U.S. election. On Saturday morning, when the Associated Press and all the other major news sources around the world called the vote in Biden's favor, I exhaled. I know there is more uncertainty and perhaps chaos to come as we watch what Trump will do and what his followers will do over the next couple of days and weeks and months, but I exhaled really deeply. I had known that I had been holding my breath during the week of the election, but on that day I realized I'd been holding my breath for 4 years. Saturday was amazing. It was a gloriously sunny day here in the DC area, and warmer than it's been recently. Everyone seemed to be out in the streets. I was trying to read a book, completely unsuccessfully, and my spouse was out for a morning walk when the announcement went out. Suddenly, we both heard a barrage of honking horns and happy shouts and even fireworks. After he arrived home, we talked about how to celebrate. Because of our desire to be in a less crowded place, because of the soaring rates of COVID here in our state and across the country and across the world, David and I decided to drive a bit into the more rural areas a bit north of us. The leaves were beautiful. The sun was shining, and a kind of peace we both haven't felt in ages descended on us. After our drive, we arrived home, made some popcorn, and decided to spend the late afternoon watching, well, we couldn't decide. I think we both knew we wanted to watch something kind-hearted and hopeful, maybe funny. But what should it be? Eventually, David suggested The American President, a movie we both have very much enjoyed in the past. That seemed like a really reasonable choice, not only joyful, but also somewhat related to our current real-life situation. I think we had already considered and rejected the idea of watching the movie Recount. I pulled up our streaming site to see if American President was listed, and as I looked, David said, "Or how about The West Wing?" Perfect. Although people have told us for years that we ought to watch The West Wing, neither of us ever had. First, we are just not big TV watchers, but especially back when West Wing first debuted. At that point, our son was a newborn, and no matter how good a television show was reported to be, we knew we had something much more amazing to watch. We didn't follow the stories of President Bartlett and CJ and Josh and Sam and Leo and Toby. Instead, we watched our infant learn to raise his head, to smile, to start to roll over, eventually to learn to crawl, backwards at first, winding up under chairs or the coffee table, at least until he figured out that he had to turn around backwards if he wanted to get anywhere. Our home show back then was amazing, for sure. But starting to watch West Wing for the first time in the hours after the election results were called, a close second. We've now seen 3 episodes, I think. And of course it's possible that I might not feel as pleased with the show as it progresses. There are certainly things that might be done differently if it were filmed now. But at least at this point, I'm thrilled to think we have this funny and sharp and incredibly big-hearted show to keep us company through any stress or chaos from now until inauguration. I definitely recommend it. Well, over this vote counting season, in addition to practicing the skills of both reading and watching television, I have perfected the skill of refreshing my assorted news pages. Somewhere, probably on Facebook, I heard about a little girl asking her mother when she would be ready to stop watching The Map Show on her iPad. I definitely got sucked in that weird vortex of The Map Show quite a bit more than necessary. Reading, on the other hand, really did not happen much, despite the very long formal November TBR possibilities list that I put out for last week. I think it's almost time to get started on that list. But they are, as Kelly titles her excellent BookTube channel, just books I'm not reading for right now. Let me mention a couple of books that seem especially right for the moment. One choice you might make is Joe Biden's book about his life before becoming vice president under Barack Obama, Promises to Keep, a book that came out many years ago, tracing Biden's political ideology, including how it has grown and changed over the years, as well as frank discussion of some of the mistakes he's made, but also about his personal life, a life consumed with a tremendous amount of sorrow and suffering in both the early years and later in his life. One of his other books is Promise Me Dad, written after his years as Obama's vice president came to an end, a book in which he addresses new grief head on. To be honest, for a wide variety of reasons, Biden would not have been my first choice for the Democratic nominee. My original belief that he could not be successful in the election was clearly incorrect. The way he has handled this difficult transition period has impressed me enormously, not rushing anything, not coming out gloating or swinging. This is a time when the country needs to heal a bit, and I think a few days of this reconciliatory tone may at least help some more leftist Democrats like me remember that compassion and kindness, rather than oppositional antagonism or vengeance, might actually be able to get us to a place of truly inclusive movements towards justice for all. And I'd love to think it might do the same for at least some conservatives. At least that's my hope. What moves me so much, despite all his human flaws and limitations, is that I think Biden strengthened his commitment to empathy, to really listening to other people's suffering, partly because of his own grief. Grief, including the loss of his first wife and their 1-year-old baby daughter in a car accident, the struggle with addiction, which one of his sons has dealt with, and the loss of his other son to brain cancer, the same kind of cancer that Biden's friend, Republican Senator John McCain, died of, and the same kind of cancer that the man I love most in this world is living with now. It means a lot to me to have a president who isn't afraid to look at the suffering and pain and sadness in the lives of his constituents. A president who understands what great sorrow feels like and isn't afraid to admit it, and who has somehow turned his own trauma not towards anger and self-protection, but toward understanding and gentleness, towards openness. I'm going to leave you with one more thing, a beautiful piece of writing by the poet Seamus Heaney. If you saw my birthday Q&A videos, you know that I was astoundingly lucky enough to study poetry with Heaney one year. I mentioned having dinner with him one night while he talked with Ted Hughes about translating classical texts into resonant contemporary works. The piece he was working on at that moment became part of The Cure at Troy, a translation of one of Sophocles' plays. Let me share just a bit of it with you. Human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. So, hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Heaney is talking about that place where grief and suffering and anger and separation meet reconciliation and hope. Well, it turns out that Joe Biden loves the plain but generous humanity of Seamus Heaney's poetry as much as I do. He's quoted various words from Heaney at different times, and he especially loves The Cure at Troy. In fact, he very recently put out a short video of himself reading an extract of Heaney's poetry, with Biden's voice over powerful footage of some of the seismic events that have rocked our world this year. If you haven't run across this video already, I've linked to it below in the description box. Don't miss it. Well, that'll do it for today. I promise that my next video will either be a chat about what I'm currently reading, or a book tag, or some other bookish content. Thanks for spending this time here with me here today. See you soon.